Well, hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today is part 2 of our Prius engine build. As you see here, we got it on a stand. Part 1, we took it out. Just a real quick thing I want to show you. The bolts that we used, you can't use the bell housing bolts. They're not long enough. But these two bolts actually came out of this engine mount bracket that bolt over here. They're long enough. We got it spaced out on this side just enough that hopefully we ought to be able to turn it. If we get this thing apart and start realizing that we can fix it, we're going to take this off to replace the rear main seal in it. But anyway, let's get started. So we're going to start taking off. Basically, just work from our way to the ground here. This is pretty much all 10, so we'll go ahead and pull the coil covers off, oil control valve, as many of the valve cover bolts. Some of them might be 12s, I don't remember, but we'll go through that. We forgot to drain the oil in the car, so we'll go ahead and do that now. With the valve cover off, we're going to go ahead and start working on our timing cover. We're going to take this is the timing chain tensioner. We're going to take it out. Then we're going to take off all of these bolts that go around the timing cover and this oil filter housing. These are going to be, I didn't count, but these are a bunch of 12s and 14s that go around there. If I remember right, I think there's four 14s and the rest of them are 12s, and we'll get those out. This is a 10. I forgot that was there. Now we're ready to take the timing cover off of it. I didn't show this. I forgot. There's a hose clamp. We're going to take this thermostat housing off with it. There's a hose clamp that's on this hose. Took it off, and I just got it kind of twisted it loose. Now, these can be on pretty tight. Even though you've got all the bolts taken off of it, they're still basically glued on with RTV. So you can pry in between here and here, but it's not recommended. There's a couple of good little purchase points that you can kind of pry on, and depending on how old it is, they will be sticky sometimes. Now we'll work on getting this chain off. This one just kind of flops around and nothing's really holding it on, so you'll pull that off like that. It kind of rides on this little dowel, 2 12s. All right, so now we're going to work on this cam cradle. I always like to pull the cam cradle. It'll kind of sandwich the cams in it together, so you don't have to pull each individual cam out of it. So this, if you can see it, it'll pull this top section off right above the head. So it's mostly 12s. It's all 12s in here, but since this is a Prius, it's got an EGR cooler on it. It does have this one bolt and stud over here, so we'll take this bolt out and this stud out, and we'll leave this on it for the time being. We'll come back to it later and take it off, but right now we're just doing some investigative work. I don't want to spend a lot of time messing around with stuff that we don't have to. The nut on this was a 12. This is an E8 E-Torx. Cam towers are all 12s. Most of them are on the actual caps here. Except for this one and this one. So with all those loose, you know, you're supposed to kind of take stuff apart in a sort of star pattern. To be perfectly honest, it doesn't really matter that much taking it off. I try to kind of space it out a little bit, but it's not super critical at this point, especially since we don't know if we can even use this motor again. But with all the 12s done, we'll go ahead and start prying up on this. Same deal as before, just try to find a place. This actually popped up a little bit on its own. Kind of pry up on it. All right, so this next step This is a zero lash motor, which means that it has little hydraulic lash adjusters in here. In theory, it doesn't matter where you ought to be able to take all these out and dump them in a box and just put them back in any place. I can tell you, not on these engines in particular, but on other zero lash motors, I don't know what it is. They must wear to each other or something. They'll make noise and stuff. So at this point, I always take them out in the order that they came in, and I put them back in the same order. So in order to do that, you can do kind of whatever. I just have this little foam thing here. I kind of made a little arrow, so this is the front of the engine. And I'm going to take all the little rocker arms off of it, these little tiny buckets right here off of it, and we're going to pull these lash adjusters. I can't get this on my fingers. We're going to pull these little lash adjusters out, and we're going to put them all back, put them all in order, and put them all back in if we can get this motor apart in the way that they came. So here they all are laid out here. We're going to get this out of the way so that we don't actually accidentally knock them over or whatever. But these little egg crate things work really nice for stuff like this. All right, so since we're just doing our exploratory surgery, we're going to leave both the exhaust and the intake manifold on it, as well as that EGR cooler. So what we're going to do is we're going to take off these these two exhaust hanger bolts here. Those are two 14s. On this side, the only thing that we're going to need to take off is where this PCV hose goes in. This is part of the PCV system, and it goes up here to this manifold. So we'll just take it off from one side. I missed it before. We're also going to have to take this 12 off for the dipstick tube. Now we're ready for our head to come off. I don't remember what size triple square this is. I will put a caption down below of what size it is, but the head bolts are triple square, and they're pretty tight, so they usually won't come loose with just an impact. So you're usually going to have to break them loose by hand. All right, we got all 10 head bolts out. Now we're just going to pull up on it. There should be 2 dowels here or something underneath. It might be kind of stuck on, but the good thing about having the intake and exhaust on it is you can just grab it and pull up. So now that we got our head off, we're going to take a look at our cylinder walls. There's a TSB for updated pistons and rings to go in these. The rule of thumb with Toyota is anytime that you see a vertical line in the cylinder walls, I don't know how well you can see in there. The camera doesn't get a great look at it, but there's a little bit of kind of vertical lines in it. What Toyota tells you to do is run your fingernail across it. If you can feel it, then that's bad. If you can't feel it, then that's good. So what little bit we can see, this cylinder right here has the worst one, which isn't bad at all, and I don't feel anything. So that's those 2 cylinders. We'll run up here and we'll look at another one. Same thing. We already kind of looked around in here. I don't feel anything with my fingernail, so that is an excellent sign. So now we're going to flip it upside down, and we'll take the oil pans and everything else underneath it off, and we'll take a look at it and make sure that the bearings and stuff are good. And we ought to be able to slap pistons in this thing and call it a day. All right, we'll go ahead and start taking our lower oil pan off, all 10s. All right, we're going to take our oil pump off with our upper oil pan here. We're going to take this spring off. I don't think that the chain will come off just with this off, but I've seen people throw an impact on this and break this little tensioner here. So this thing's got a little spring behind it. We'll take it off first, and then we'll, if we can walk it off, we'll walk it off. If not, we'll throw an impact on it. So what I do is I like to kind of get all the slack out of it on the side that you're going to be whacking on. So our upper oil pan's a bunch of 12s. They all go around the perimeter, so we'll zip them off. All right, now we're going to go ahead and take our rod caps off. These are 12-point 10 millimeters. Make sure you put these back where they go also. Oh man, that bearing looks brand new. Sweet. I don't know as much about these engines as I do the 2.4s, the 2AZs. We did a ton of oil consumption cars on those. On those, number 4 was always the one. If you had bearing issues, it'd almost always be number 4. So this is number 4 on the car. This thing looks brand new. So I'm feeling pretty excited right now. Go ahead and do the same thing with numbers 2 and 3 in the middle. Now I'll go ahead and start popping these pistons out. I like to take just a lady foot and stick it right in the hole where the bolt goes. I'll just stick my foot up underneath it. That bearing looks good. And we'll do the same thing with the rest of them. Went ahead and broke our main caps loose. We'll just go ahead and take a quick peek at them. Those bearings also look brand spanking new. I don't know how well you can see this, but the reason we keep saying that they're brand new, they look brand new, is you can almost see like little machine lines in it. I don't know how well you can see that, but that's the way that they look brand spanking new. They have those little kind of machine line looking things in them. But so we'll go ahead and check the rest of these, and we'll get our parts ordered and get ready to go back together with this thing. So we got all our parts in. Now it's time to start going back together with it. What we're going to do is, Toyota frowns upon this, but we're going to just take a quick honing to these cylinders. Not going to try to take a lot of material off. We just kind of want to get the glaze off of it. Again, you don't have to do this. Toyota does not want you to do this, but this is my car and I'm going to do what I want to do with it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of oil, put it on a rag, and just kind of wipe the cylinders down. Then we'll take our hone. And that's basically all we're going to do. We're going to do that to all four cylinders and move on. All right, now that we got them honed out, the stones are basically sand.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
So we want to try to get as much of that stuff out as we can, but really try to get all of it out. But we're just going to wipe it down with a little bit of soapy water and get a nice fresh shop towel or something lint-free rag if you got them. And we'll wipe the cylinders down. that stuff. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and put our new pistons onto our old rods. This is kind of interesting. This is the first time I've seen this, but ordinarily on the pistons, they'll have, this one has an A, this one has a C. There'll be A, B, or C. There might be a D. I've never seen one, but A, B, or C. And those correspond to the diameter of the wrist pins. The TSB only gives you one part number, and they're all A's. And so I was questioning parts about it, and we never really could come up with an answer until I got the parts and realized they come with their own wrist pins. So that explains why they're all A's on there. Now, I don't know what the difference is between the rod sizes. I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there, but that's the difference between the A, B, and C's. Apparently this TSB changes everything to A's and gives you A wrist pins. So anyway, what we're gonna do is you always want to make sure that you orient it the same direction. I don't know how well you can see this little arrow right here, but there's an arrow that kind of points that direction. So we're gonna make sure we put this one on in this orientation. I like to put the wrist pin, or put the little circlip in one side of this thing first. Now we'll take out our other one. So before we get this going in, double check, make sure that we're in the right orientation. So it's going to go like this. Now we'll throw a little lube on this very dirty wrist pin. All right, that one's done. So we'll do this to the rest of them, and we'll move on. All right, so we got our wings on now. I'll briefly kind of show you how this goes. There's a grand total of 5 rings. There's 3 oil ones and 2 compression ones. So if you're looking at the piston like this, the top ring gap will be right there. The second compression ring gap will be 180 out from that. So 1 top left, 2 bottom right. The ring expander one is going to be in line. You see where that it looks a little bit different on that expander ring. That's going to be in line with the top one. And the top oil ring is going to be at the bottom left, and the bottom one oil ring is going to be on the what is the top right. But that's the orientation that it goes in. I'll show you real quick of just what it says to do, but that's how it goes in. They're numbered. The rings are numbered. So the oil rings, the little scraper ones, are interchangeable. The number 2 and number 1 rings will have a little number on top of them that tell you what they are. So this one is 1R, and this one will be 2R. So you put those numbers up. But that's how that goes in, so we'll go ahead and knock this out for the rest of them. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and put our piston in. So this is the front of the engine this way, so the little arrows go towards the front of the engine. I always lube the rings down nice and thick with lube. Nice generous coating of lube. Then we get our ring installer here, our piston installer. There's a top and a bottom. I don't know how well you can see that. There's a top and a bottom. So what you do is you put it on like so. It'll have a little thing like that to squeeze them together. Set this down in here, get the skirt started in. And then just tap her home. Simple as that. Alright, so now we're going to go to torquing our main caps because we pulled them off to check those bearings. Torque spec on them is you do 30 pounds and then you do 90 degrees. So we'll do the 30 first. Alright, I don't know if I had mentioned this before. These are the main caps are 12.14 millimeters. Now we're going to go ahead and do our rods. Our rods are 12.10 millimeters. Torque spec on them is 15 foot-pounds and then 90 degrees. Alright, so we got everything cleaned up. I didn't bother to show you that just because, I mean, you're just removing gasket material and stuff. We did, I don't know if you noticed it, we did pull off the MG1 clutch and everything on it and threw a new rear main seal in it. We'll put it back on before we go back in the car with it. So we got our lower oil pan. This is how the sealant goes. It's basically outside this one hole right here, and it's inside the rest of the holes. Do yourself a favor, put a little bit of fippage right there on the corners where that rear main goes on, and we'll get this on. All right, we're going to go with our head bolts. These are torque to yield bolts. You got to use new ones. Toyota actually has a process of measuring stuff. Just get new ones. You always want to put a light coat of oil on it when you get it. You don't want so much that you hydrolock it, but you do want a nice little coat of oil on it. Do that to all of them. Make sure your washer's there, and get ready to torque it down. We're going to go ahead and torque our head down. So the head bolt torque is in 3 steps. It's 36 foot-pounds, then 90 degrees, then 45 degrees. And so anytime you're doing a head, you always want to start from the center out, and you want to cross. So it'll be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Something vaguely resembling that order, to try to distribute you want this to be as flat as possible. So let's start out with our 36. this is our 90 step. And our last 45. All right, now we'll start putting our lash adjusters and rocker arms and stuff back on. All right, now we're going to go back on with our cam cradles and cams. This part, be vigilant. These little rockers, they like to fall off. They like to go jump off. So, all right. Before I tighten this down, I didn't mention it. I didn't think about it. But if you go back a little bit, you'll see that I have all of the pistons down off of top dead center. I do that on purpose. You're really not supposed to take this off. Well, you can take it off together. You're really not supposed to put this back on together. So what I did was I just have it relatively close to where the marks are going to be. And when you go down with this, don't be surprised if this cradle doesn't go all the way down, because we're pushing valves open now. We got the cams in it, so we're trying to push valves down. So I've got it pretty close to where it's going to be on top dead center, but even if a valve's going open that shouldn't be open, it's not going to hit anything because all my pistons are down right now. So that's the thought process behind this. So we'll just kind of slowly work our way around snugging this thing down before we start torquing it. Torque spec on these is 20 foot-pounds. Same thing with the head. Just kind of work your way in to out. All right, so for the life of me, I've asked the guys at Toyota school. No one's ever been able to give me an answer, but for some reason the oil pump has timing marks on it. So it'll be this mark on the gear that we took off here, and it's going to line up with, you can't see it, there's a mark right here on this crank gear. This is also has like a little half moon, so I've found it kind of works better if you kind of figure out where this is first. Let's see our marks here. So this is going to be down over here somewhere. All right. We're now going to put it back on with an impact. We got the crank bolt in it, so we'll use the crank bolt to our advantage. There's three marks on here. There's an E, an I, and then like a line. This one is going to go on the line. The exhaust cam is going to go on the line. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's a line right underneath that mark. That mark right there. On the intake side, there's two lines on it, but you go off of the one that's the closest on the inside gear. And that's going to go in between these two links here, these two orange links here. It goes down to your crank. There's just a dot that the yellow mark lines up with. And that's it. We're going to put our chain guides back on, our tensioner back on, and call it a day. This one is the one that just fits on the dowel and then rolls up. So we're ready to go back on with our cover. The sealant goes basically inside, on the inside of all the holes. Just to say that I said it, you're actually supposed to use a different kind of sealant right here. Water goes through here, so Toyota makes a different kind of sealant. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm just telling you that that's what you're supposed to do. Got our new crank seal in. There is sealant right here on this one. That's going to go right here on the engine. Everything else is O-rings. Make sure if you take nothing out of this video other than this, replace these O-rings. These, when you take this off, these will be flatter than a pancake. Put these on. So we'll go on with their cover. Oh, and another thing, every Toyota timing cover that ever leaks right here. So do yourself a favor and throw a line where the head meets the block. That's where they all leak. So I do it everywhere that there's a seam. So where the cam cradles go, where the head goes, and then where the upper oil pan goes. But this is basically the spot that they leak at when they do leak. Your 110 has a little washer here, so that's why we didn't have to put sealant on the inside of that. A little gasket type washer. Gonna put our oil filter housing on now. Same deal. Make sure you replace these two O-rings. So when you pull the tensioner out, it's going to deploy as far as it'll go. To get it back in, you kind of press right here with like a pocket screwdriver or something. And squeeze it back in. Easier said than done sometimes. Then you put this little hook right there, and you're ready to go back in. All right, so to deploy this tensioner, we're going to run the crank bolt back in it. Then we're going to turn it all the way counterclockwise. And so what that's doing is that's pulling down on this chain. And so that's actually squeezing it back in. Then we got to go. You hear that noise? That's it releasing. That's catching on those little mechanical stops that it has. So that's it. Timing chain tensioner is deployed. We're all good. We're going to put our intake back on it now. One thing I wanted to show you before we did it, I did it as a preventative type thing. These little holes that are right here, those are the EGR ports. All these third-gen Priuses have a tendency to, these will clog up. And so let's say 2 of them were clogged and 2 of them were operational or partially clogged. Basically what will happen is when EGR engages, it's going to dump 4 cylinders worth of EGR just into these 2 cylinders, and it'll cause a misfire. So I took a little like bottle brush, like wire pipe cleaner type brush down to all those ports and blew it out. There's a TSB for an updated intake manifold, but they worked initially, so theoretically if they just stay clean, you shouldn't have that problem. Again, this is my car. If it happens down the road, I'll just put another intake manifold on it, but I got it off, so I figured I might as well do it. That one seems long. That must be for something else.
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
So get a good look at the fuel rail, because it took me a minute to figure out how it went back on after I pulled it off, because there's several options of holes over here that it could have went in, but this is the orientation of that. So here's some glamour shots of our nice, cleaned up, practically new engine. These 3 bolts here are the engine mount bracket, so we'll put those on later in the car. Everything's looking good. I'm kind of digging it. So, well, that's gonna wrap up part 2, guys. Basically, what we did was we did pistons rings, and I had mentioned in part 1 at the very beginning that this car was also burning coolant. Usually that means that the head gasket's leaking. It wasn't burning coolant that bad. A lot of times what they do is they will leak between the layers. So that gasket's like 3 layers. It'll leak coolant between the layers of the coolant jacket and the cylinder. And so a telltale sign for that will be you go drive the car, when you park it, the pressure of the cooling system will cause some of the coolant to leak into a cylinder. You really can't see it, but it's a pretty common problem around here. It's like 180,000. They all kind of start doing that. So I'm not really sure what the misfire was. It did it sometimes. It didn't do it other times. That's also why we cleaned out those EGR ports. But anyway, this is a pretty, it's a semi-common problem. There's a TSB for it. If you were brave and you wanted to maybe stick a borescope down the cylinders, pull the spark plugs out, look down in the cylinders with a borescope at your cylinder walls, you could do this in the car. It's really a matter of personal preference. I don't like doing it in the car because you just get oil and stuff dripping on you all the time. In my opinion, it's faster. That motor does not take very long to come out. It's way faster and cleaner for me to just pull the motor, stick it on an engine stand, do it on the engine stand. But you don't have to do that. You could do this in the car if you wanted to. But if I had a nickel for every time that I was going to attempt a repair in the car and then got the head off and found that I was going to need an engine, at this point I'd probably have $1. So anyway, appreciate you guys sticking with us so far. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you got something out of it. Stay tuned for part 3 where we will stick this engine back in the car and hopefully go drive it down the road. See you then.